Okay, I want you to think about the very last thing you bought. Maybe it was a quick coffee on your way to work, a new pair of sneakers you saw on Instagram, or, I don't know, even just a specific brand of toothpaste. Now really ask yourself, why did you buy it? You're probably thinking, well, because I wanted it, or because I needed it, but the truth is actually a whole lot more fascinating than that. There's this massive, invisible web of forces secretly dictating your choices way before you even reach for your wallet.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to put on our detective hats. We are analyzing consumer markets to solve the core mystery of your purchasing behavior. We're going to unpack the exact science behind why you, and honestly everyone around you, buy the things you do.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll nail down what consumer behavior actually is. Second, we'll look at the consumer behavior model. Third, we'll dive into cultural and social influences. And finally, we'll wrap up with your personal factors.
All right, let's jump right into part one, consumer behavior. What exactly is it?
You know, when most of us hear the phrase consumer behavior, we just picture that split second where someone hands over cash or swipes a card. But the formal definition goes so much deeper than that. It's the study of how individuals, groups, and organizations select, buy, use, and, this is absolutely crucial, dispose of goods, services, ideas, or experiences to satisfy their needs and wants. It's a full life cycle. It literally starts the moment a desire pops into your head, and it doesn't end until you throw the packaging away or pass the item on to someone else.
Moving on to part two, the behavior model. Let's map out this process. This model perfectly captures the journey of a purchase from start to finish. Think of it like a flow. On the far left, you've got the things marketers control, tactics like the product itself, the price, the brand, alongside the broader market context, like the economy or new tech. All of that input flows right into the middle box, the consumer. Inside your mind, your unique characteristics and psychology process all that information. And then finally, that internal processing pushes out to the far right, leading to the actual buying decision process and the ultimate purchase. So it's this really elegant flow from an external stimulus through your internal filter to an outward action.
Now notice those three specific categories acting as the ultimate filters for every single purchase: cultural, social, and personal factors. They basically take all those thousands of marketing messages flying at you every day and translate them into a yes or a no. For the rest of this explainer, we're going to unpack exactly how these three filters work.
Which brings us to part three, cultural and social influences. The really broad stuff. The absolute broadest influence on our behavior is culture. Culture is essentially the ways of living built up by a group of human beings and passed down from one generation to the next. Think of culture like a giant iceberg. The visible tip includes physical things, like clothing or architecture. But that massive, invisible underwater portion, that's our deep-seated religions, beliefs, and societal norms. And within that broad culture, we also have subcultures and social classes that further refine our worldview and, of course, our buying habits.
To really understand how culture gets a grip on our wallets, we have to look at its key dimensions. Our values dictate what we deem acceptable or totally abnormal, which directly shapes our attitudes towards certain products. Then you've got manners and customs. This is huge. It dictates everything from our eating habits to our work hours to appropriate social behaviors, like whether you greet someone with a handshake, a kiss, or a bow. It even dictates highly complex behaviors like gift giving. And don't even get me started on perceptions of space. Different cultures have entirely different rules about personal space and conversational distance, which directly impacts how retail stores are designed and how salespeople are trained to interact with you.
Actually, here's a wild one that brilliantly illustrates how deep culture goes: our perception of time itself. Let's look at the concept of monochronic time. This is a rigid orientation where individuals are highly focused on schedules and punctuality. Time is viewed as a linear resource. Literally, time is money. It's why we panic if a website takes more than 3 seconds to load, right? The United States is a prime example of a monochronic culture. People often feel hurried, impatient, and constantly driven by the clock. Think about how that one specific cultural trait impacts consumer behavior. It creates this massive, insatiable demand for fast food, express lanes, one-day shipping, and productivity apps. The culture literally creates the consumer need.
All right, let's shift our focus slightly. We're moving down the funnel now, from the broad culture of an entire society to the specific social circles that influence your day-to-day life.
One of the most powerful social factors is your reference groups.
This includes any group that has a direct or indirect effect on your decisions. For example, we have aspirational groups. These are the groups we desperately want to join, so we buy the clothes and products that align with them just to fit in. On the flip side, we have dissociative groups, groups whose values or behaviors we actively reject, meaning we will intentionally avoid buying brands associated with them. No way do we want to be seen without logo, right? You also have opinion leaders and influencers within these groups who offer trusted advice, heavily steering what you end up buying.
But out of all your reference groups, the most primary, most influential group by far is the family. Interestingly enough, this shifts over time. You start with your family of orientation, the family you're born into, your parents and siblings. They instill your baseline values and your initial brand preferences. But later on in life, you might form a family of procreation, the family you create with a spouse or partner and potentially children. When this shift happens, your buying habits fundamentally transform because your new family structure dictates a completely new set of daily needs.
And finally, part 4, your personal factors, the ultimate filter.
At the end of the day, there's only one you. Your personal characteristics act as the final, definitive gatekeepers for any purchase. What's your current age? What stage of life are you in? Your occupation and your current economic circumstances, meaning, let's be real, your actual bank account balance, will very quickly veto or approve a buying decision. Furthermore, your personality, your self-concept, and your core lifestyle values dictate what products just feel right for you. This is where consumer psychology frameworks, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, come into play. Your purchase has to satisfy where you currently sit on that pyramid, whether it's just a basic physiological need like hunger or a high-level desire for self-actualization. A product has to survive the cultural filter, the social filter, and finally, this deeply personal filter before you will ever decide to buy it.
Okay, let's pull the whole shebang together and see how this builds in the real world with something super simple, a box of Hamburger Helper. At first glance, it's just a box of pasta sitting in the grocery store, but let's apply our filters. First, cultural. We discussed monochronic time, where people feel rushed and heavily value speed. This product promises a fast, easy meal, perfectly satisfying that cultural demand. Second, social. We talked about the family of procreation. A parent with hungry kids needs to put dinner on the table efficiently, which heavily influences this purchase. Finally, personal. A consumer's specific economic circumstances might make this a highly attractive, budget-friendly option for feeding a group. So this one single product sits right at the perfect intersection of cultural timing, social family structures, and personal economics.
So what's the big takeaway here? You are never, literally never, just making a random choice. You are the product of your culture, your society, and your personal circumstances. Knowing what you know now about all these invisible forces, I want to challenge you. The very next time you find yourself standing in a store aisle, reaching for a product, play the detective. Stop and ask yourself, is this really just a personal whim, or is it a deep cultural value, a social expectation, or a specific life stage secretly guiding your hand? The answer might completely change the way you see yourself. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and definitely keep questioning what's behind your everyday choices.